Hi, this is Paul Sullivan. I'm a friend of Zig Ziglar and the Ziglar family, a pharmacist and a clinical nutritionist living in Santa Barbara, California. I've known Zig for at least 20 years and had a particular story I'd like to relate that it was, you could call it a day with Zig. You know, he was out here in Los Angeles at one of his Peter Lowe seminars at some point about 10 years ago, and we were planning to, he asked me to come down, pick him up, and we would go golfing later that day, or absolutely it was the next day, in Palm Springs. So I picked him up at the Staples Center. I actually got free tickets to listen to him speak, and then afterwards we were to leave at noon. But as predictably, he was signing books for an additional hour. I mean, the people were just lined out the door, and as long as there was anybody there that bought a book or a tape and wanted his autograph or shake his hand, he was always so accommodating. So as a result of that, we were a little late leaving, and I scooped up. We went down to the room, the guest room down below in the Staples Center there, and picked up his clubs, etc., and headed for. We're heading for the door, and as we're walking out, in comes Tommy Lasorda, and he was looking for Barbara Bush, and he said, "Is Barbara Bush around?" And we said no, and he said, "Well, I'm Tom Lasorda." He stuck out his hand, and Zig said, "I'm Zig Ziglar. This is Paul Sullivan." And then Tommy just walked around, turned around and left. You know, he says, "I'm looking for Barbara Bush." It was really kind of strange that he'd be that abrupt, but he's got certainly an ego here, at least in Los Angeles. But to his credit, he came back about 3 minutes later, just totally embarrassed, and held out his hand to Zig and said, "I'm sorry. It just struck me who you were. You know, I've certainly admired you for many, many years." And Zig just said, "Tommy," he said, "you're the big guy here in L.A. I'm just a guy from Dallas." You know, just another example of his humility. So we went from there, got in the car, and he said, "You know, Paul, I'm hungry." And I said, "Zig, we're kind of in a bad part of town. We were cutting through the freeway, and we're actually in a ghetto." And he said, "I don't care. Let's pick that place over there." And we went in, and the place was closed. But it said, "Come in through the back door for a free lunch." We parked in the back, and I had this, big fancy car at the time, a Mercedes, and we sat in the back by a dumpster, and we walked in the back door, and they were giving out, it was Tuesdays, they were giving out free lunches to the people in the neighborhood. Very kind of them. And it was a black staff that, as we were going through the line, they said to Zig, "Aren't you somebody famous?" And he said, No, I'm not. No, I'm just here to, have a little bite to eat. So we picked up our meal, and we went in the back. There's not a chair left in the place. We sat in the car back by the dumpster and ate the chicken, and I'm just sitting there laughing, figuring, my goodness, this is, hardly the way I thought the day would start. So I went back in to take my plate back in before Zig was finished, and they asked me, "Who is that guy?" And I said, "Well, it's really Zig Ziglar." They said they thought so. They all came running out, gathered around him, gathered around the car, the whole staff. And he spent the next 15 minutes, giving them his story of how he was converted to Christianity by a black woman that came to visit his home one weekend. And they were all, of course, elated. He gave out his card. He was going to mail them all books. It was quite an inspirational event for them and for me. So then we got back in the car, started to head back down to Palm Springs, and he said, "Paul, I could deal with some ice cream." So we pulled off. It's about a 2-hour drive in about an hour, and went into this 31 Flavors, and we went up to the counter, and he said to the gal behind it, he said, "Do you like ice cream?" And she said, "Well, yeah." She's a little puzzled, working in ice cream. So I said, "Well, do you like fruit?" And she says, "Well, yes, I like fruit." She says, "Do you like bananas?" He says, "I love bananas." He says, "Well, do you like banana splits?" And she said, "Well, of course I like banana splits." She says, "Well, would you make me the biggest banana split and make it just like you'd make it for yourself?" which was, of course, she gave him something. It was about 5 pounds of ice cream. And I think he might have left one spoonful before we got back in the car, but it was pretty funny. And, of course, the whole staff came over recognizing him again. And he would shake their hand and give them business cards. And we moved on down the road. So we went to the La Quinta Hotel, and it said this is just a continuing example of this man's humility and sincerity. So we got to the La Quinta Hotel, and somebody, I can't remember the name of the person on his board of directors, had arranged for a free room for both of us, and of course golf the next day. So he said we got checked in, went to our rooms, and about 10 minutes later he showed up at my doorstep. And I had this very nice room that his board member had arranged for us. And he's there with his suitcase and his golf clubs. And I said, Zig, what's up? He said, Paul, he said, they rented me a house, and I'm not going to take it. He said, it's very expensive, has to be a couple $1,000 a night. He said, I'm going to come in there and bunk with you if it's okay. And of course, I was more than welcome to, have him share a room with him and be able to even get caught up more on, what was happening with our lives and our families. Then later that night, I said, Zig, I'm so in appreciation of all of this, the hotel, the golf tomorrow. Let me take you out to dinner. And he said, well, what would be the best place you could think of? The cost is no issue. I said, I'd like to take you to the finest place, and this is actually be in Palm Desert. And he said, Paul, I said, where I'd like to go right now, he says, I know they got a special on this week, is the Red Lobster. He said, they have the best fish in town, and I don't want you spending any more money on me. So here's a guy, that just spoke earlier that day in front of 15,000 people. Got them all, very inspired and motivated. Had signed books for many hundreds of them, maybe 1,000 of them, for many hours. Would had lunch at a kind of a ghetto diner in the back next to a dumpster. Ice cream along the way, the biggest banana split I've ever seen. A guy that had the humility to not want to have people overspend on him on a hotel room, and then later that night ending up eating a simple fried fish dinner with all the French fries he could eat. That would be where I could have taken him to the finest restaurant in Palm Springs. So where this man is a lot of things, and everybody knows him maybe more about his spoken word and his written word, and that certainly is kind of exemplified in his book, In Born to Win, with which some may look at a culmination of his life's work, where it really talks about, how it's you're designed for accomplishment and designed for success. And of course, it's all about planning for it and expecting it. And it's a wonderful book, and I'm hoping it's not his last, because this wonderful man has had a very large effect on my family, and all the people around me. And I'm just proud to be a friend of his and to be able to relate this story about one simple day in the life of Zig Ziglar. Thank you.